He sat behind the broken wall, close enough to hear the teacher's voice, far enough to stay hidden. Every day, after serving tea at the small stall near the school gate, Arif would quietly slip to that same spot. He couldn't see the blackboard, but he could hear the lessons. He had no notebook, no pen, only a brick in his hand and the dusty ground beneath his feet. That was his classroom. While other boys learned math and clean uniforms, Arif learned it by scratching numbers into the dirt. When they read stories from thick English books, Arif whispered them to himself from pages torn out of old newspapers. Every page he found in trash bins became his treasure. He kept them hidden in a small plastic bag under the tea stall. Sometimes he heard kids laugh about their boring homework. He wished someone would give him homework too. One evening, as the sun began to set and the tea stall grew quiet, Arif stood near the garbage bin outside the school. He poked through crumpled paper, searching for pages with writing. His hands were black with ink and dust, but his eyes lit up when he found an old math worksheet, looking for food. Someone asked Arif, turned it was the school's watchman. Before he could explain, the man grabbed him by the collar. Thief, you've been sneaking near the school, haven't you? No sir, I was just a loud slap cut his sentence. Go tell your father to find you work, not dreams. He didn't cry, not until he reached the back of the stall. He sat in the dark, staring at the worksheet he had managed to hold on to. His cheek burned, but his heart burned more. That night, he slept next to the tea crates. His father was away for a night shift at the construction site. His mother had died when he was 7. Since then, Arif had learned to be his own mother, his own teacher. Next morning, as he poured tea into chipped cups for customers, an old man sitting at the corner of the stall called him over. He wore simple clothes and thick glasses. He had seen Arif before, always reading, always silent. What's your name, son, Arif? You like reading? Arif nodded, unsure if he should speak more. The man placed a newspaper on the table and pushed it forward. Read this headline aloud. Arif hesitated. Then, in a low voice, he read, Government to build new science school in Lahore. The man smiled. In this paragraph Arif read fluently, not just the words, but with understanding. The customers nearby looked up. The man laughed gently. A boy who can read like that should be in school, not serving tea. Arif lowered his eyes. School doesn't want boys like me. The man's smile faded. We'll see about that. Come meet me tomorrow, at sunrise. Bring all your books. Arif didn't sleep that night. He gathered every page, every scrap of writing, every newspaper clipping he had saved. At dawn, he washed his face and walked to the mosque where the old man had said to meet. The man, Professor Idris, was waiting with 2 stools and a notebook. For the next 6 months, Arif sat with him every morning for 1 hour. He learned grammar, math, even bits of science. The professor brought old textbooks, scribbled notes in the margins, and told him stories of great people who started with nothing. You're not poor, he said once. You're just delayed, but not denied. With each passing day, world grew bigger. He began solving problems most 10th grade students failed. He started writing small essays in English. The tea stall became his study table after sunset, but life doesn't wait for dreams to catch up. One cold morning, Arif came to the mosque but found the stool empty. Professor Idris didn't come that day, or the next, or the next. After a week, Arif asked around and found out the professor had collapsed in his home and was taken to the city hospital. He had no children, no family nearby. Arif rushed there, holding the professor's books to his chest. He wasn't allowed in the ICU, but the nurse gave him a folded envelope. He told us to give this to you. His student, Arif, opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a short note, in Professor Idris's neat handwriting. Arif, knowledge is a light no one can take from you. You are that light now. Don't stop learning, even if I'm not there to teach. Tears rolled down Arif's face as he clutched the letter. That evening, back at the stall, he sat silently with the books. A customer noticed him and asked, Where's the old man who used to come here? Arif simply said, He left me everything I need. But even as he tried to believe those words, doubt crept in. How far could he really go, now that the person who believed in him was lying in a hospital bed? Just as he closed the last book that night, he overheard a group of students talking at the stall. Did you hear about that scholarship exam? They're letting outsiders apply to this time. Arif's head turned slowly toward them. A spark lit in his tired eyes. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment his teacher had prepared him for. He didn't know how. He didn't know when, but one thing was clear. He had to try. Arif didn't sleep that night. He sat beside the stove, holding the scholarship form he had borrowed from a student. His hands trembled as he looked at the questions. Most of them were in English. Some words were difficult, but he didn't panic. He heard Professor Id's voice in his mind, Don't fear paper, fear stopping. He had 10 days to prepare. No teacher, no classroom, no proper books, just belief. Each night, after work at the tea stall, he studied under a street lamp. Some days the lamp flickered. Some days he used the flame of the stove. People passed by, shook their heads, or laughed. This boy thinks he's going to college. Let him dream. But he kept going. 3 days before the exam, a rich man's car broke down near the tea stall. The driver asked for water. and Arif quickly served him. The man, wearing a white suit and gold ring, stepped out. He looked annoyed. Why is this taking so long? Arif, not one to speak unless asked, stayed quiet. But the driver saw Arif reading something under the counter. The man raised an eyebrow. You read English? Arif nodded. What are you reading? He showed him a page of math problems. The man took it, scanned it, then looked at Arif again. You solved this yourself? Yes, sir. The man said nothing for a while. He folded the page and said, come to this address tomorrow. Ask for Mr. Yawar. He handed Arif a card. It felt expensive, thicker than normal paper, with gold letters. For a moment, Arif wondered if it was real. The next morning, after asking 2 shopkeepers for directions, he stood in front of a tall gray building. It had glass doors and clean floors, things he had only seen in movies. Inside, a man in a tie took him to the top floor. There, Mr. Yawar sat behind a desk, flipping through a thick file. You're early, he said. Arif stood silently, unsure what to say. Yawar looked up. Sit. He placed a test paper in front of him. This is not the scholarship exam, but it will tell me if you're wasting my time. Arif nodded. He took the pen. The room was silent. 30 minutes passed. Yawar took the sheet and glanced at it. His eyes stopped on one answer. He leaned back in his chair. Who taught you? A man named Professor Idris. Arif replied quietly. Where is he now? In the hospital. Yawar didn't ask more. He opened a drawer and placed a blue envelope on the table. This is a recommendation letter. With this, you can enter the scholarship exam directly. No school needed. You still have to win it, but now, you'll be allowed to try. Arif's eyes widened. He took the envelope as if it were made of glass. But why? He asked. Yawar's voice softened. Because, many years ago someone gave me a chance to, and because a boy who teaches himself under a street lamp deserves one. Arif bowed his head, trying to hide the tears in his eyes. The next 2 days passed like a dream. He didn't tell anyone about the letter, not even his father. He still came home late, still served tea, still studied. On the day of the exam, he wore his only shirt with no holes, tucked into old pants. He had polished his shoes with cooking oil. At the exam hall, other boys came in cars, holding pens that clicked. Arif carried one pen half used and wrapped in tape. He sat down. The paper came. He closed his eyes for 1 second. Don't fear paper, fear stopping. He began to write. The hall was silent, only the sound of pens scratching. Time slipped away. He didn't look up once until the bell rang. He placed his paper on the desk and walked out. No celebration, no smile, just silence. A week passed, then 2. The tea stall became busy again. Nobody asked about the exam. Arif swept the floor and boiled the milk like nothing had changed. Until one afternoon, a postman came. Letter for Arif. Hussein, his father, took it, confused. Who sends letters to my son? Arif snatched it gently. It had an official seal. He opened it slowly. His hand shook. You have been selected under the National Scholarship Program. Please report to Government Model School for admission. His legs went weak. He sat down on the ground, staring at the paper. His father looked at him with blank eyes. What is it? Arif didn't answer. He just placed the letter in his father's hands for a moment. His father said nothing. Then he touched Arif's head gently. You did what I never could. That evening, as the sun set behind the stalls and the boys walked home in uniforms, Arif stood outside the school gates, not to sneak in, not to listen, but to walk through the front door. But just as he stepped forward, a voice stopped him. Boy, you again. It was the same watchman from before. What are you doing here now? School's closed. Arif held out the letter. The man read it. Then read it again. His face changed. You got in? Arif nodded. Not just in. I earned it. The watchman stepped aside, speechless. Arif walked in slowly, his eyes scanning the place where he had once hidden behind a wall. Arif sat on the wooden bench, holding his new textbooks like they were made of gold. The classroom smelled like chalk and fresh paper. It was the first time he had a chair with a back, a table of his own, and a teacher who called his name not to scold him, but to teach him. But even though he was inside the school, he didn't feel like he belonged. Most students came from rich homes. Their shoes were clean, their English smooth, and their pens expensive. They laughed loudly and answered quickly. Arif stayed quiet. He listened more than he spoke. He wrote slowly but neatly. He asked questions after class, never during it. One day a boy named Adnan leaned over during a break. You're the chaiwala's son, right? Arif looked up, unsure how to answer. Adnan smiled, but not kindly. Don't worry, we won't ask you to serve tea here. Just don't sit too close. The smell, you know. The others laughed. Arif didn't react. He opened his book and read silently. But that night, as he walked home, those words stayed with him. The next morning he arrived early and cleaned his seat with a handkerchief. He washed his hands twice before opening his notebook. He didn't want to give anyone a reason to laugh again, but the teasing didn't stop. One afternoon, a paper plane hit him during history class. Then someone whispered, Chatu, more milk please. Even the teacher smiled faintly. Nobody stopped them, but he didn't complain. He had fought too hard to enter this building. He wasn't going to let jokes push him out. Instead, he worked harder. When others slept, he studied. When they went to parties, he worked weekends at the tea stall. Every rupee he saved, he hid in an old pencil box. But then came the real test. Final term required a project. Each student had to present something original in front of the class. It would count for 30% of their grade. Arif didn't have money for models or printed charts like the others, so he made everything by hand, cutting shapes from cardboard boxes, painting with leftover colors, using matchsticks for diagrams. The night before presentation day, rain poured down heavily. Arif wrapped his project in plastic and held it close, but the wind was cruel. Just 2 streets away from school, a bicycle rushed past him and splashed water on the project. Some colors ran, one chart tore slightly. He stopped under a small roof, his heart pounding. Should he go back? But there was no time. He entered the school, wet and shaking, holding his ruined project. In the classroom, the laughter began again. Look at that. Did you make that in the garbage? Did your teacups teach you art? Arif's ears burned, but he said nothing. When it was his turn, he stood up. Slowly, he placed his project on the table. Some boys snickered. Even the teacher seemed unsure, but then Arif spoke. His voice was soft at first, but steady. This is not perfect. I didn't have money to buy fancy materials, but every part of this was made with my hands. And with the little time I had left after cleaning tables and serving tea, the room became quiet. He continued explaining how his model showed a clean water system for villages. He talked about health, about dignity, about how many children like him fall sick, not because they're weak, but because the water they drink is dirty. His words touched something in the room. Even the teacher leaned forward. When he finished, nobody clapped. Not out of rudeness, but out of surprise. Then someone at the back began to clap slowly. It was a girl named Sana. Then another joined in. Soon the room echoed with applause. The teacher stood up. Arif, that was the most thoughtful presentation I've heard this term. Your grade is an A. Arif smiled, not with pride, but with relief. But just as things were beginning to change, a new problem appeared. One evening, Arif returned home and found his father sitting outside, holding his head. What happened? Baba, they're raising the rent. His father's voice cracked. If we don't pay double by next week, we have to leave, and I can't find extra work. Arif felt like the ground under him had shaken. If they lost the house, he'd have to leave school. There would be no way to walk 2 hours each way daily. He'd be back at the tea stall maybe for good. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. And then, for the first time in years, he cried. Tears rolled silently down his cheeks. He had come so far, but life once again was trying to pull him back. The next morning, he made a decision. He would not give up, not this time. Arif woke up before sunrise. His pillow was still damp from the tears he had cried the night before. The smell of chai and dust filled the room, but something inside him had changed. He was tired of feeling helpless, tired of watching life push his family down. As he folded his blanket, he noticed an envelope by the door. It had no stamp, no name, just for Arif written in neat handwriting. He looked around. His father was still asleep. Curious and nervous, Arif picked it up and opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dear Arif, I saw your project yesterday. I saw your courage, and I saw your pain, though you tried to hide it. I once sat in the same room, in the same seat, but I couldn't stay. I left because I couldn't fight what you are fighting now. You reminded me of who I was before I gave up. You made me remember that children like you don't need pity, they need a chance. There's an envelope under the flower pot outside your door. Use what's inside wisely. A friend who believes in you. Arif's hands trembled. He ran to the flower pot. Hidden beneath it was another envelope, this one thick and heavy. He opened it and froze. Inside was cash. Neatly stacked, bundled, more than enough to cover the raised rent, and enough to pay school fees for the next 2 months. He sat on the doorstep, staring at the money, his heart pounding. Who had left it? Why? He looked left and right, hoping to catch a glimpse of someone walking away. But the street was empty. That morning, he handed the money to his father. His father's eyes widened. Where did this come from? From someone who saw my project. Someone who believes in me. His father didn't ask more. He just hugged him tightly. Allah sent an angel. Arif, through your hard work. The next few weeks were calmer. Arif paid his fees. They stayed in their home. His father found a part-time job in a bakery nearby. The tea stall became a weekend thing, but the mystery of the letter stayed with him. Every day he looked around the school, wondering who had sent it. Was it a teacher? A neighbor? Someone watching from afar? One afternoon, while walking past the school library, he saw a woman in a blue shawl standing outside. She had a soft smile and kind eyes. She looked at him briefly, nodded once, and walked away. He ran to the corner, but she had vanished. He never saw her again. Still, that moment gave him something stronger than money. Hope, confidence. He began to speak more in class. Help others who struggled. He started a small tutoring group after school, where he taught math and science to younger students from the neighborhood for free. He told them, "You're not less than anyone. You just need to work harder, but you can win." One evening, while walking one of the boys home, Arif passed by the old school gate, the one that was once slammed shut in his face. The paint was peeling now. The building looked tired, like it was holding on to its last breath. A sad thought crossed his mind. So many kids still stood outside those gates just like he once had. Only now, he wasn't a boy outside the gate anymore. He had come in, he had stayed, and now, he was thinking about how to open it for others. That night, he pulled out a notebook and began to draw. Not just math or science this time, but a plan. A school where no child would be turned away, where fees would never be more important than dreams. Where Chawala's sons and daughters would sit next to doctors' children and no one would laugh. He called it Open Gate School. The name made him smile. He didn't know how he would build it. He didn't even know where to start, but he knew one thing: he would do it. No matter how many years it took, no matter how many times he failed, the road ahead would be long, maybe impossible, but then again, people had once said he would never get inside a classroom. They were wrong then. They would be wrong again. Arif stood in an empty plot on the edge of the slum, dust swirling around his shoes. It wasn't much, just broken land, some wild grass, and a few stones. But to him, it was everything. It was where his dream would begin. He had asked the local council for permission to use the space. At first they laughed. "A school, you hear?" one man had scoffed. But after weeks of knocking doors, filling forms, and convincing neighbors to support him, the answer came. Permission granted for a community education center. But no funding. That didn't matter. Arif didn't expect money. All he wanted was a start. The next morning, he carried a small wooden board with him. On it, he had painted with white chalk, "Open Gate School for every child." He placed the board at the edge of the plot, planted it deep into the soil, and took a deep breath. This was it. No building, no chairs, no roof. But it was a beginning. He gathered the neighborhood kids and invited them. "Come tomorrow, we'll start with reading." Some came barefoot, some shy, some curious. One boy said, "But there's no classroom." Arif smiled. "This is our classroom. Look up that. The biggest roof you'll ever see." They all looked up and saw the sky. He borrowed books from old teachers and taught with chalk on broken bricks. Slowly, word spread. More children came. Some mothers brought roti and water for them. A carpenter from the next lane donated wooden planks. Arif used them as benches. For months, he taught under the open sky. Heat, dust, rain. He didn't stop one day. While teaching multiplication tables, he saw a group of men in suits standing by the gate. They were from a private school. Nearby. The man in front spoke coldly. "What are you doing here?" Arif stood up straight. "Teaching." The man scoffed. "Without a building. Without permission to teach formally." "I have permission for a center," Arif replied. "And these children are learning." "Are they learning, or pretending?" the man asked sharply. "No books. No uniforms. This isn't real education." One of the boys stood up. It was Fahad, the boy who had once failed every subject. "Sir," he said boldly, "we read better now than when we were sitting outside your school." The man didn't reply. He just walked away with his team, leaving behind silence. Arif sat down and continued the lesson. But inside something shook. Maybe they were right. What if this wasn't enough? That night, as he stared at the stars from his roof, doubts filled his mind. The children deserved more. Not just hope, but real classrooms, real blackboards, real change. He wrote a letter, then another, then another. To NGOs, to donors, to anyone who had helped build schools in the past. Most never replied. Some sent kind words but no money. But one day, a letter came back. From a woman in Islamabad who ran a foundation for underprivileged children. She wrote, "I saw pictures of your Open Gate School. I see no gates, no walls, but I see learning. I want to help you lay your first brick. Can we meet?" The next week, she arrived. Her name was Safia. She walked slowly, holding a small notebook and wearing simple clothes. But her eyes sparkled. When she saw the children reading under the tree, "This," she whispered, "is what real education looks like." She offered to fund one classroom. It wasn't much. But to Arif, it was gold. Construction began. One room, cement walls, tin roof, simple windows, but strong enough to last. The children clapped when the first brick was placed. Arif held it in his hand, kissed it softly and said, "This is for all of us." It took 2 months to build. When it was done, they held a small ceremony. Neighbors brought sweets. Arif's father made chai for everyone. There were no ribbons, no balloons, just joy. Raw and real. And on the door of the new room, Arif nailed a wooden sign that read, "Classroom of Dreams" inside. He placed a framed photo. It was a picture of that old gate, the one that was once closed to him. And under it, these words, "From closed gate to open doors." He didn't cry that day. He smiled. But deep in his chest, his heart whispered, "This is just the beginning." The next goal, build 3 more rooms. Arif reached the school early one morning. As always, the children weren't there yet, but the air was already full of birdsong and hope. He unlocked the classroom, arranged the books on the dusty shelves, and wiped the little wooden desk with care. This classroom meant the world to him. It had taken blood, sweat, and sleepless nights to build. But as he stepped outside to prepare the open area where he still taught half the students, a man in a white shirt waved a piece of paper at him. "Are you Arif Khan?" "Yes," Arif replied. confused. The man handed him an envelope. This is a legal notice. You are to vacate this land within 15 days. What? Arif said, his heart sinking. It's council land. A commercial project has been approved here, a shopping plaza. Your structure is illegal now. The man turned and walked away, leaving the envelope in Arif's trembling hands. He opened it slowly. Every line felt like a knife. The land that had been given to him for community use was now being reclaimed. No explanation, no negotiation, just an order to live. That evening, Arif sat inside the one-room classroom, staring at the bare walls. The sun dipped low outside, casting long shadows across the floor. The laughter of children, the dreams they shared under that roof, all of it felt like it was slipping away. He didn't know how to tell them. The next morning, he gathered the children and their parents. They want to take the school away, he said quietly. Gasps filled the air. One mother broke into tears. But where will our children go? Another father stepped forward. This school is not just a building, it's hope. Fahad, the boy who once couldn't read a word, held up a notebook. If they break this school, do we stop learning? Arif felt his throat tighten. No, he said firmly. We don't stop. Not now. Not ever. That night, Arif went door to door in the neighborhood. He asked for signatures. He spoke to the press. He met with the local council again, but the man who once supported him now avoided his eyes. The land's value has increased, he muttered. There's pressure. There's money involved. Arif didn't give up. He wrote letters, sent emails, posted pictures of the school online. The photo of the children reading under the tree went viral. People began to share it. With the hashtag #SaveOpenGate, school news channels picked up the story. Reporters arrived with cameras. One evening, Arif stood in front of a microphone, his voice shaking but steady. They denied me education once. Now they want to deny it to these children. This time, we will not stay silent. More support poured in. A famous author sent funds. A retired judge spoke in their favor. Even a Bollywood actor tweeted, he built a school where they once closed the door on him. Don't close it again. #SaveOpenGate school. For a moment, hope returned. But the council remained firm, and then one night, while the children slept in their homes, a bulldozer came. Arif was woken up by a phone call. They're destroying the building, someone shouted. He ran barefoot through the dark streets. When he reached the plot, he froze. The walls were coming down, bricks scattered, the roof half crushed. The sign "Classroom of Dreams" lay broken on the ground. He stood there, helpless. By morning, only rubble remained. The children arrived, wide-eyed and silent. Some cried, others stood in disbelief. Arif picked up a piece of wood from the wreckage and held it close. They had taken the building, but not the dream. He turned to the children and said, tomorrow, we meet again. Under the same sky, same place. We begin again. Fahad raised his hand. Even if they come again. Yes, Arif said. Even if they come again. But in his heart, he knew he couldn't fight this alone. He needed something more. And that night, an unexpected call came from someone who had once been his biggest enemy. The phone buzzed past midnight. Arif almost didn't pick it up. His eyes were swollen from crying, his mind tired from worry. But something told him to answer. Arif said a deep voice. He sat up. He knew the voice. It was Mr. Kamal, same man who once denied him entry into the private school as a child, the same man who watched him cry at the gate 20 years ago. I saw the news, Kamal said, and I saw you on TV. I recognized your face, and I remembered that day. Arif said nothing. I was wrong, Kamal continued. I said you didn't belong in a place of learning, but today, you're teaching the whole country what real education means. There was silence. Then Kamal added, come to my house tomorrow morning. I want to show you something. Arif arrived the next day, unsure of what to expect. Kamal lived in a large house, but his expression was different now, soft apologetic. He took Arif to a small plot of land on the edge of the city. This was mine, Kamal said, unused for years. But now I want it to be used by someone who truly understands what it means to build something from nothing. Arif's eyes widened. The land was even bigger than what they had lost. I'll help fund the new school, Kamal added, and I'll tell the truth. I'll tell people how I once shut a gate in your face. But now, I want to help you open one for others. Arif couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears falling freely. Within days, the news spread like fire. Man builds school where he was denied gets support from the same principal who once turned him away. Donations poured in from around the world. Volunteers arrived. Architects offered to design for free. Even the children helped carry bricks. Arif didn't just rebuild a school, he rebuilt a future. This time, it had proper classrooms, clean water, bookshelves, a library and something else. At the main gate, a large board read, Open Gate School, where every child belongs on opening day. The crowd was huge. Parents, children, neighbors, journalists all stood waiting as Arif held the ribbon in his hand. Before cutting it, he called Fahad, the little boy who once stammered to read a sentence. Will you do the honor? Arif asked. Fahad smiled wide and cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. As people entered, they saw photos on the wall, photos of the children, of their struggles, of the old school's broken bench, and the moment it was torn down. but right in the center was a framed piece of wood, the broken sign from the old school classroom of dreams. Beneath it, a line read, "Dreams cannot be bulldozed." Kamal spoke too, from the stage. "I once said a poor child had no place in my school. Today, that poor child has built a place for all children. He taught me the meaning of real education." That evening, RF sat alone in the last classroom. He looked at the rows of clean desks, the books lined up neatly, the blackboard waiting to be used. He remembered the boy who stood outside a gate, his shirt torn, his shoes dusty, his eyes full of hope. That boy hadn't disappeared. He had simply grown up and built his own gate.